Hey, Professor MacPhail, how you
Hey,
doing?
John. Good. Pretty
Yeah,
good.
me too. So welcome to, I guess this is the first in a series of chats that are being recorded between faculty in the College of Arts and Letters at Stevens about what we do and about the world. And we're trying to introduce ourselves to people outside Stevens, prospective students, that kind of thing. So I'll introduce myself first. My name is John Horgan. I'm a science writer. I've been a science writer for about 30 years. I've been teaching at Stevens since 2005. I run what's called the Science Communication Program at Stevens. I'm still writing. I have a blog for Scientific American. And with me today is one of my favorite people at Stevens, Professor Theresa MacPhail, who is an expert in something that's called medical anthropology. So Theresa, maybe you could start just by saying, what is medical anthropology?
That is an excellent question. Basically, medical anthropology is looking at the field of medicine through a cultural lens. So it's looking at all of the cultural aspects of the delivery of healthcare, how we think about things like health and wellness and illness, and how our belief systems and rituals and ways of talking about things have real world effects in how we treat illness and how we live our lives. People like virologists, epidemiologists, immunologists. So I think of them like their own little group. And in a sense, they are. They have their own language, they have their own rituals, they have their own rules. So it really is like a little mini culture inside of a larger culture.
So you seem to have the perfect background for understanding what's going on in the world right now. I mean, so we're recording this in May 2020, and we're still in this lockdown or semi-lockdown because of this plague that has swept around the world, which is freaking everybody out and raising all these questions about the capacity of our healthcare system. So I guess I just wanted you to tell us how this looks from your perspective, as you're really an expert on this stuff. So how does the world look to you as an expert?
It looks confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it. I think that one of the things that's really interesting is that our culture isn't set up to deal with this at all. Most countries, most cultures aren't really adept at coping with massive scale disruption, and that's basically what I've been focusing on, is how people are trying to quickly adapt their normal ways of doing things to an abnormal, unprecedented series of events.
Do you think that, I mean, what has this whole crisis told you about, I don't know, the nature of expertise in the medical community, and especially the community of people who do epidemiology and study infectious diseases? Does it seem like they were prepared for this? Do you think that they've responded well?
No, I don't think we've particularly responded well, and there are some reasons for that. I think that part of it was overconfidence. We tend to deal with outbreaks fairly well. I mean, at least we seem to deal with outbreaks fairly well. So the way people's attention to global health, public health is constantly operating in the background. You just don't see it. And it does a really good job, which is why you don't see it. So, we don't have outbreaks because there are people out there catching initial cases and doing contact tracing and really halting things before they even get started. And then in rare occasions like the 2015 Ebola outbreak, the system responds in a different way, and everyone's attention is focused on Ebola. But like, for instance, probably a lot of people don't know that it's the last few cases of Ebola were just eradicated in the Democratic Republic of Congo, like maybe 4 weeks ago.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, the thing is this stuff has usually a smaller scale, and the places that are dealing with it know that it's going on. But like here in America, we go back to life as normal, and we forget about the fact that this stuff is going on. So I think we thought our capacity for, we look at a place like Congo and think, well, we're so much more advanced, our systems are more advanced, like we wouldn't get into that situation. And I think that's what happened when we looked at what was going on in China. We made some assumptions about their capacity versus our capacity, and we were wrong. I mean, we weren't alone. Italy was wrong, the UK was wrong, Germany was wrong. We all thought that we would be better at responding, and we weren't. And I think that was overconfidence. And also, we didn't really understand this virus. And I guess that's what you're really asking me. I think it's difficult to be an expert when there's something new in town.
So you have been sought out as an expert. I interviewed you for my Scientific American blog because you know more than anybody that I know well about infectious diseases and about how the world responds to them. Your thesis was on which outbreak was it?
The 2009 H1N1 flu pandemic.
Right, and you were in China you were in China for some reason when that broke out, right?
No, so it was half and half. So I was here in the US inside the Centers for Disease Control for half of it. And then I went to Hong Kong to interview virologists who study bird flu and other forms of influenza, to kind of talk to them and try to get a feel for how we think about something like influenza and why we're so scared of influenza. That's part of what's going on right now, is that a lot of our pandemic planning was about influenza. Right. And coronavirus has very different characteristics than influenza does, so we were kind of unprepared. Asia is doing much better than us because they had more experience with SARS, so they actually had a pandemic playbook that looked a little bit different because of that. But we just rolled out things that we did and will continue to do for influenza, but it wasn't a good fit for what is happening.
So you have been interviewed by Anderson Cooper on CNN. You're a celebrity now. You also were interviewed by Vice. I assume there might be some other places that have interviewed you. How do you see so you're a scholar who works in academia. How do you see your role as somebody who is also communicating to the public? Do you see that as an important part of your job, of your role as a scholar?
Definitely, because what I think a lot about is how these experts, so how a bunch of people working on the SARS coronavirus and a bunch of people working in public health departments, so all these epidemiologists, how they talk to each other, and then how we understand what they're telling us. And so that part of it is crucial. And also, people don't really understand how they talk to each other, and they don't really understand how science works, especially in this kind of a situation where, this is a new pathogen. We had never seen it before, and we don't know a lot about it. And we're still learning about it as we go. And that can seem confusing to people who don't know that that's normal. So I feel like my role is to kind of be a translator in between realms. And I feel like sometimes public health isn't so good at explaining the ways that they come up with their recommendations. They just give their recommendations, but they don't really explain how public health works. And I feel like people would be less outraged, like when a recommendation changes, like suddenly, you know, we went from not wearing masks to wearing masks, and the public really flips out about stuff like this and thinks they don't know anything. And that's not true. It's that based on their best knowledge at the moment, it seemed like masks weren't a good idea. And now we know that we didn't think it could pass through the air, and we thought it was droplets, not aerosol. And now we know that it can linger in the air for up to 14 hours, which makes wearing a mask a lot more important than it did when we thought it was just touching hand to face contact that was giving us the illness. So those kind of changes, if the public doesn't understand that those are normal, I think there's this idea that it's just chaos. So I feel like someone like me can help to explain to the normal person who doesn't know all the fancy terms and doesn't think about this stuff on a day-to-day basis. I can maybe help explain what's going on.
How do you think this whole episode that we're all going through is going to change your teaching at Stevens, if at all?
I think it's going to change it dramatically, because I don't think I talk enough about doubt versus certainty.
Yeah.
And that science really operates around doubt, not certainty. But that it doesn't mean what everyone thinks it does. I mean, you know, that doesn't mean we deny the science. It just means you need to look deeper at something, and that you're constantly aware that you could be wrong. And I think so many people are not willing to do that, especially in today's culture. So I think I'm going to lay a little bit more emphasis on how we cope with uncertainty and how we know what we know, and the very important step of self-reflexivity, or looking at your own patterns of thought and how you think you're so certain, or how you think you know something. I think I'm going to do a lot more of that, because I think that's what this pandemic is really bringing out, is that we in some ways don't know how to think about the world anymore.
Do you think it's fair to say that that is a fundamental difference between the humanities and, let's say, the sciences and engineering disciplines, that the humanities have more of an emphasis on doubt and uncertainty?
I think they have more of an emphasis on, yes, on self-reflection and the limits of knowledge. And I think that's important in today's world, and complexity. I think what humanities and social sciences do better than science is complexity. Like the ideal scientist is reductionist, like you're boiling everything down, trying to find one answer, or trying to find like a way to fix the problem, which is, you know, going to be one or two things. And a good social scientist or humanities person looks at the problem from a more complex angle. And that's the way life is. Like right now, obviously, there's so many things going wrong in this pandemic: economics, supply chain, information sharing, communication problems, cultural problems where people are doubting the science, and all these conspiracy theories. Like, that's a complex problem. Like, science has a tendency to look at the problem and say, this is about this virus. Here's the problem. Like, if we can just, you know, figure out how to stop this virus. But the problem of the pandemic is about a lot more than just the virus. It's about so many different systems failing at once. And I think that's what we do best.